Hi there and welcome. In this demo, we are going to look at an AWS solution involving DataSync. DataSync is a high-speed cloud data transfer service that helps you to copy files between AWS storage services. It can be very helpful if you need to copy huge amounts of files very quickly between AWS storage services. It comes with lots of features that helps you to protect the data while it is in transit. It helps you to avoid data duplication. It can help you to copy the files even in exactly the manner that you want. So it gives you better granularity. It can even help you to schedule these data transfer jobs as well. Let's look at the design or the architecture at a closer level because it looks like a lot of things are happening here. Okay, so from my left, you see that there is a US East 1 region or North Virginia region, and I have my VPC A in that region. That is my source. And on my right, I have US West 2 region, Oregon, and I have VPC B there as my target. So this basically sets up the scenario for what I want to do. You can see that I have a VPC peering connection that connects these two VPCs. Originally, without VPC peering, these two VPCs are going to be isolated boxes, unable to communicate or talk to each other. But because I need to transfer files between these two VPCs, VPC peering gives me that capability to connect these two VPCs, and we are going to see how it works in the demo. All right. Within VPC A, my source, I have an NFS server. An NFS server is basically a network file system that you can have on a Linux server, okay? And that is exactly what I'm going to create on EC2 within a private subnet in my source VPC. Within that same source VPC, you can see here that I have a systems manager endpoint. This is because I want to have secure access to this NFS server if I need to get on there to inspect something. I don't want to carry out an SSH connection over the internet into this NFS server. I want to be able to do that securely through AWS APIs, and that is where Systems Manager comes in. Again, because we are dealing with a private subnet, I am totally dealing with private connectivity, which means that unless I allow it, you are not going to be able to have access to any server that I put within these private subnets, right? And that is the whole point of using a VPC endpoint for Systems Manager. If my NFS server here was in the public subnet, then I wouldn't need to worry about the VPC endpoint. But because it is in the private subnet, I need this. All right. The same thing is going to happen in the target region because we need that same level of connectivity to an instance here that you can see, the NFS client. The NFS client is going to basically help me to talk to this NFS server here or carry out any tasks I need to carry out on it because there's going to be connectivity between these two VPCs. If I also need to carry out, and you'll see what I'm going to do, other tasks, this NFS client is going to help me do that. The target storage solution in this case is the Elastic File System, or the EFS, right? And this is a POSIX based file system that you can have permissions for files created and a whole kind of file system running that even multiple EC2 instances can be able to connect at the same time to such a file system, and you can kind of use the file system. It's very high performant and it offers really cool features for you to get these kind of things done. So of course, another thing is that within this target region, we are going to have extra VPC endpoints because of EFS and DataSync. Because we are in the VPC and we need to have ability to talk to these services, we need endpoints for them basically, right? So there is going to be a DataSync endpoint and then an EFS endpoint in addition to the systems manager endpoints, all right, that are going to enable connectivity for these two services. So this is basically how it's going to run. This is basically what we are going to do. So let's go to the console and take a look. So from my source region, you can see that I have a StackSet deployed. This StackSet spans the two different regions, all right? So it deploys some resources that I need, basically the networking with security groups, the IAM role for the agents or the servers, right? So I have VPC security group, VPC endpoints, and what else? Yeah, pretty much that's what I need to have things go smooth for this demo. So I kind of specially selected what I'll deploy here. And if we go over to the target region, you realize the same kind of thing is happening. All the endpoints for the different services that we need are deployed, along with the networking and all the security groups. Everything looks good to go. Everything is intact. So let's start from the source region. So from the source region, I'm just going to go to my EC2 console, and I'm going to start by launching the NFS server. I'm just going to use an Amazon Linux AMI, as you can see, already selected from there. I'll keep my instance type to this. We are not going to need the key pair because of SSM. And let's choose our source VPC that we created. And we're going to stick to the private subnets. I'm going to just select the NFS server security group here, and then I'll keep the storage as I have here for the root volume, but I need to add a secondary volume because apart from the root volume, this secondary volume is going to be the data volume, which is actually going to house the data that we are going to copy, right? So I'm just going to duplicate the storage configuration there to give me the second EBS volume. Going further down, I need to choose an instance profile that is going to specifically enable us to access this NFS server via Systems Manager. So that's what I created, and that's what I just selected. The last and very important thing is that I need to have the NFS server kind of just spin or span up automatically while this machine is getting created, right? So I need to put in a special script that I've created again here that is going to just create that server for me whilst the machine is starting up. And I'm just going to go grab it here. NFS server, copy all of this, put it here. Let's just review this quickly. So I have my NFS server on Amazon Linux AMI with a T2 micro instance type. I'm proceeding without a key pair. I have my networking settings complete with my storage, my instance profile, and here we go. All right, so we're just going to give this some time, let it create. And whilst that is getting through, I'm just going to wait for it a little here to come up running, and then we can move to the target region. Okay, so it's going to take a while to perform all those tasks and get things going. So I can always take a look back at my diagram so I know exactly what I'm doing. So here we have the NFS server getting up. So let's go over to the target region and spin up the NFS client. So here I am in the EC2 console from the target region, and I'm ready to start creating my NFS client. We're still going to use Amazon Linux AMI. We'll keep the instance type just as the same as the NFS server. We need to select our VPC with a private subnet. This also needs the SSM instance profile. And we are good to launch the NFS client. Next, we're going to launch the DataSync agent. This one takes a bit of a different turn to launch. We'll look at the AWS documentation for the specific instruction on how to launch the DataSync agent, and we'll go ahead with that. So to deploy our EC2 agent, we basically need to run this command to determine the specific AMI for the DataSync agent, and then we can proceed to use that AMI in this URL to be able to create or launch the DataSync agent. So let's go quickly to run this command from Cloud Shell right here. I'm just going to substitute this with the region in which we are. And there we have the AMI ID here. So we're just going to grab that and I already have that URL here with us. So, and I already even have the AMI ID put into that URL here. So all we need to do now is copy all of this URL, take it to a new tab and paste it in there. And this is going to basically load up some default settings to help us launch the DataSync agent. So I'm just going to keep this as default because this came with the configuration from what we started with. But I'm going to make the instance type a T3 medium for the agent because this is the minimum requirement for the DataSync agent. We keep all other configurations similar to what we had for the previous ones. DataSync security group, and I can always keep my GP3. And I'm just going to leave this configuration as default here. And also ensure that the SSM profile is attached to the agent just in case I may need to get in there to do anything. With that, we can launch the DataSync agent too. While these two instances are still warming up, let's head over to the EFS console and create the file system. I'm going to put in a name here, DataSync EFS. I'll choose my VPC and I want to customize this. I'm going to leave this as regional. We can keep these backups on. We don't necessarily need the encryption, so I'm just going to keep it off for now. All other settings I can keep as default, but there is an important, okay, we're not yet there. So for this page, we keep all these settings this way and go to the next page. For the network, we need to ensure, of course, that our VPC is selected. And then for the subnets, we need to select the private subnets. Ensure that you have the private subnets selected. And for the security groups, we need to uncheck the default security group and ensure that the EFS security group is selected for both subnets. With that, we have created our EFS file system. This brings us to the completion of all the resources for the target region. We can now validate all the resources we have created so far. Let's start with the NFS client. So you can see that our NFS client instance is running, and I'm just going to go ahead now and try to connect to it. I'm going to choose the session manager option, and I should be able to use this to connect to the instance. Yes, so there you have it. I'm able to connect to my NFS client. I shouldn't worry about connecting to the DataSync agent really for now. So I'm not going to bother about getting into that one, but let's go and check out our NFS server. So in the source region, you can see the NFS server is also up and running, and we need to get in now, connect to it, and actually verify that the storage is in the right order and we have the NFS server created for us, right? So I'm going to connect to my NFS server. Yes, so SSH works, I'm in, and I just need to run this command to actually validate that the storage is in the right order. So you can see that I do have my root volume intact, and I also have my data volume here intact, which I'm actually going to be using to run this transfer, right? So everything looks good from our NFS client and also back to our NFS server. We now have all resources created and we have validated all of them. So it's now an important time to peer these two VPCs and create the routing between them so that we can have traffic flowing between these two VPCs. So let's head over to the source region. I'm going to find and open peering connections from here. And I'm going to start by creating a new peering connection. I'll just call this DataSync peering. So my source VPC is obviously my source region VPC. And then under here, I'm going to maintain my account and I'm going to choose another region for the region here. And that other region has to be my target region. And then I will provide the VPC ID of my VPC in the target region. Once that has been done, I can create the peering connection. Once this peering connection has been initiated from my source region, I need to go to the target region and go to the peering connections and accept that request. So you can see that this is pending acceptance. So I'm just going to go ahead and accept this request. You can see all the details here. And that will provision or create the peering connection. We now also have to go ahead and modify the route tables to ensure that traffic is going to flow between these two VPCs to the exact subnets that we want and how we want them to happen. So I'm going to go to my route tables. So the way I have it set up is that I have two route tables for the two different private subnets. Even if I'm not going to use one of the subnets, I'm still going to make sure that the peering connection has access to both subnets. So I'm just going to select my first private subnet or route table here, and I'm just going to edit the route. And I should be allowing my source region VPC CIDR to have access to the peering connection. And I'm going to do the same for the other private route table too. Once this is done, routing has been completed for the target region. Let's go over to the source region and find our route tables. And I'm going to choose my first private route table. No, this should be to my peering connection. Get that right. And then I'm going to go to my other route table. Also to the peering connection. All right, so this should complete the peering connection creation and also routing process for these two VPCs. So once this is done, it means that we should be able to have access to, say, the NFS server from the NFS client in the target region. That's the reason why we created, so in the security groups for the NFS server, you see that I created rules that are going to allow ICMP connection to the NFS server. This is to help me to validate that when I actually complete peering connection setup and the routing, that I will be able to have traffic flowing from the NFS client all the way from my target region to the source region. So if I go back to my target region and I go to my NFS client, let me see if I still have that here. Yes, I do. So this is from my NFS client, and I'm just going to go grab the IP address of my NFS server, and I should be able to run a ping to my NFS server from here. All right, so you can see that this works out perfectly, and my NFS client is able to reach the NFS server from all the way from the other VPC cross region. So this validates our peering connection. We are now ready to mount the NFS server and the EFS file system from the NFS client. We will also use the NFS client to obtain the activation code for the DataSync agent. Let's start by making a directory on the NFS client with this command, and we'll also use this command to mount the share. All right, so to validate, let's just run this command, and you can see here that our NFS server or NFS share has been mounted from the client. Let's do the same for the EFS file system. This pretty much gives us an easy way to do this. We can just use this command to get the same thing done, but we have to create that directory for the mount point first. Once that is done, I can now run this. I'm just going to validate again using this command. And there you have it. The EFS file system is mounted and the NFS share is also mounted. We're going to go ahead now and obtain the activation agent for the DataSync. So we do have the DataSync agent created here in EC2, but we need to actually make this agent available and usable to the DataSync service from here. So you can see that from our DataSync console, we actually have no agents active here. So there is an important step in that process of creating the agent where we need to provide the agent activation key. So I'm just going to start the process here, and then we'll move over to obtain that activation key and be back here. We are going to use the private link or VPC endpoint option for the service endpoint because we are not in a public subnet or scenario, and our VPC endpoint for the DataSync service has automatically been selected, and we're going to keep the subnet to the private subnet A and keep the security group because that is the default or the automatic one. And here we are going to go grab this activation key right here. So we are going to test the connectivity first to the agent and also ensure, just as we've done with the NFS server, that we can connect to that DataSync agent. So let's just grab the IP for that and fix it in here. And we can go back to run this command from our NFS client. And I can go back to running that command. And that validates that we can connect to the DataSync agent. All right, so we can now obtain the activation code using another command that we have here. We would need to replace the DataSync agent IP here, and also provide the DataSync VPC endpoint IP over here, since we are using again VPC endpoints to achieve connectivity here. So let's go to the VPC console, and we're going to go to the DataSync endpoint and just obtain the IP address for the DataSync VPC endpoint. Provide that here, and then the IP for the VPC or the DataSync agent itself is also going to be provided here. We are ready to run this. This command gives us back the code that you can find here, and I'm just going to copy that right now and place it here. This becomes the activation code that we can also use from here to activate the agent. All right, so you can see from here that we have our agent activated, it is active, and we are ready to proceed. Next, we are going to create the locations for our DataSync transfer. So I'm just going to head over to locations here, and all these locations are going to be created from our target region. I'm going to create the location for the NFS server first. I'm going to choose an NFS file system. The agent is obviously going to be the one we activated for this purpose, and I'm going to get my NFS server IP provided here, and I need the mount path for that NFS server to also be provided there. Let me go grab that again from here. That would have to be from my NFS client here. So you can see that this is the mount path for our NFS share, and this helps us to create the location. We also need to create the location for the EFS file system. This is going to be the default or root path. Even if I don't provide this, it's also going to use the default or root path anyway. I'm just going to go again with the private subnet here, and I would have to choose the EFS security group here for this. And I can also choose to ensure that the transfer uses TLS encryption, and I should be ready to create this location. Now that my two locations have been created, all I need to do now is, and I want to refresh this page again, ensure that my agent has access to both locations, and then I will go ahead to create a task that connects these two locations. So this is from NFS to EFS, those two locations, and I'm just going to say test task. All right. I'm going to basically choose to scan everything, and because this is the very first time we are running this, we can choose to transfer all data. We can also choose to verify all the data. We can keep these settings as they are, but modify to suit your needs. We don't need to schedule this task, and I want a full log of all transferred objects and files, so I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to auto generate a log group for us to have the logs go in there for CloudWatch. With that, the task is ready to be created. Once that is done, I can start this task. And this is where all our effort is going to pay off. This is how we know we got everything right. This is how we know everything worked out well. And we are just going to wait for the result here. So I waited for my transfer and it was able to complete successfully. You can see the execution status from here, success, and how much time it took, and all of those other details. Let's head over to CloudWatch, and then we can take a look at some of the metrics or the logs from this transfer. So you can see that we have a log group for DataSync, and then there was a task that got run, and then we can check in there to see the details. Doesn't look like this has anything, and yep. So because I opted to have a full log of all the files transferred, there you have it, the complete log of the entire transfer in there. That concludes it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you found this video useful, hit like and hit subscribe. Thank you for watching.